I hadn't planned on ever going back to Willow County. It's the kind of place that sits so far off the main roads that even GPS gives up trying. But when I got the call that my grandmother's estate had finally passed to me, the farmhouse, the orchard, the land, I didn't have much of a choice. She'd lived there her whole life, on 50 acres of apple trees that no one else in the family wanted. When I was a kid, she used to say, "The orchard keeps the house alive." I never knew what she meant by that, and I never asked. The drive took nearly 6 hours. The last stretch of road was just gravel, narrowing until the trees closed in over the path like a tunnel. When I finally saw the house again, that faded white 2-story with its warped porch and chimney leaning slightly left, it looked exactly how I remembered, like time had stopped here decades ago. The lawyer had left the keys in the mailbox. The metal was cold, even though the air was still warm from late summer. When I opened the front door, a wave of dry, sweet air hit me, the smell of old apples and dust. Inside, everything was just as she'd left it. The floral wallpaper peeling in curls, the ticking clock in the kitchen still running, somehow. And on the table, a small bowl of apples, fresh, shiny, perfect. Except no one had lived here in almost a year. That night, I stayed in the downstairs bedroom. The floorboards creaked whenever the wind brushed against the house. But somewhere around 3 a.m., the sound changed. Not creaking, but shuffling, like footsteps. Slow, deliberate, just outside the window. I froze. The curtains were drawn, but the porch light flickered faintly through the fabric, and in that faint light, I saw a shape. Tall, bent, unmoving. For a full minute, it didn't move. Then, slowly, it turned. And I swear I heard the faint crunch of an apple being bitten into. When I pulled the curtain aside, there was nothing there. Only the orchard, stretching endlessly into the dark. The next morning, I walked outside to look. The dew clung to the grass like tiny pearls, and the orchard looked peaceful again. Rows of trees heavy with fruit. But something caught my eye. At the base of one of the trees, a patch of soil, freshly turned, and half buried in it. Something metallic. I brushed the dirt away. It was an old tin box, rusted but still intact. Inside were faded photographs, black and white, of people standing among the trees. But in every picture, the faces were blurred, except for one. My grandmother, smiling, holding a basket of apples, and behind her, standing in the shadows between the trees, a tall, pale figure with no face. The second day started with that same sweet smell. Apples, always apples. It hung in the air, thick and heavy, even when I stepped outside. The orchard looked beautiful in the morning light, rows of green stretching out in perfect symmetry. But as I walked between the trees, I noticed something odd. Every apple looked ripe, too ripe. And there were no insects, not a single fly, wasp, or bee. My grandmother used to say, "The trees don't need tending. They remember what to do." I thought it was a figure of speech. Now it just sounded wrong. Near the back of the orchard, I found another patch of turned earth, fresh, damp. And when I dug a little with my boot, I saw white roots pushing up through the soil. They weren't thin like apple roots. They were thick, almost like tendons, pulsing faintly. I took a step back. The ground shifted under me, soft, like a sponge. And from somewhere deep below, I heard something that didn't belong in soil. It sounded like a heartbeat. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time the wind moved through the orchard, it sounded like whispering. Not random, rhythmic. Almost like words I couldn't quite make out. I went to the kitchen for water and noticed the clock had stopped at 3:17. Same as last night. Ticking. Then silence. Then I heard a door open. The back door. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out onto the porch. The air was colder, sharp, unnatural for summer. The beam cut through the mist and landed on the edge of the orchard. Something was moving out there. A shadow between the trees, tall and crooked, gliding rather than walking. It stopped halfway between me and the tree line. and for a moment I thought I saw it lean toward me. The air shifted. The smell of rot cut through the sweetness. I blinked, and it was gone. When I went back inside, the bowl of apples on the kitchen table was full again, every one of them bright red and perfectly shaped, except for the one on top. That one had a single bite missing, and a faint bloody fingerprint on the skin. The next morning, I found something new. Footprints leading from the orchard to the porch. Bare, human, and stopping right at my door. I spent the morning searching for answers. The cellar seemed the best place to start. It was where my grandmother used to keep her preserves, her tools, her secrets. The door groaned when I opened it. The smell hit me instantly. Earth, metal, and something faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. Dust danced in the thin beam of light from the hatch above. Shelves lined the walls, old jars filled with dark liquid, some still sealed, others leaking a sticky black syrup that clung to the glass. And there, on a small wooden table, lay a leather-bound book. A ledger. It was cracked, the spine soft from years of use. The first few pages listed harvest dates and quantities, the kind of thing any orchard owner might keep. But the further I read, the stranger it got. The later entries didn't list bushels of apples. They listed names. Each year, 1 or 2 names, written in my grandmother's careful hand. Beside each name, a symbol, 3 intersecting circles drawn in black ink. And beside that, a number. 1963, Clara M. 1971, James D. 1978, Samuel P. 1989, M. Porter. The names went on, until the last page, 2014, L. Harper, my mother. My throat went dry. I flipped the next page, expecting more, but instead there was a blank space, except for one line written at the bottom in darker ink. The next must come of blood. I slammed the ledger shut. The basement air felt heavier now, pressing against me, humming like the soil itself was alive. When I turned toward the stairs, I froze. There were footprints on the dirt floor, bare, fresh, leading toward the far corner, where a wooden crate sat, half covered by burlap. I pulled the cloth aside. Inside the crate was a cluster of apple roots. But they weren't roots. They were fingers, pale, knotted, and moving slightly, like they were trying to reach out. That night, I dreamed of the orchard. The trees were swaying, their branches full of faces instead of fruit, whispering, open-mouthed, silent screams beneath the leaves. And among them, my grandmother stood with her back to me, pruning a tree that dripped red into the soil. When she turned, her eyes were completely black, and she said, "You can't let them starve, child. You're all that's left." I woke up to the sound of wind, but when I looked outside, not a single tree was moving, only the soil. It was pulsing. The next morning, the air was too still. Even the crows had stopped calling. The orchard looked the same, golden light between the trees, a soft mist curling over the grass. But the silence felt wrong, like the world was holding its breath. I went out with the ledger in my hands, desperate for answers. I followed the path past the oldest tree, the one with the hollow trunk my grandmother used to warn me about. Its bark was split wide now, and something shimmered faintly inside, like sap mixed with glass. When I leaned closer, I saw them. Eyes, dozens of them, embedded in the wood. Human, blinking slowly as if half asleep. Then the earth beneath me shifted. Not a tremor, a heartbeat. The ground rose slightly and fell again, a rhythmic pulse that traveled through my legs. And with each beat, the trees seemed to breathe, their branches expanding and contracting. A voice came from behind me. Faint, fragile, but familiar. "You shouldn't have read it." I turned, and there she was, my grandmother. Her body looked wrong. She stood perfectly still, her dress stained with soil, her fingers black at the tips, roots curling from beneath her sleeves. But her eyes, those were still hers. "The orchard needs what we give it," she said softly. "One life for the next harvest, one soul to keep it alive." I stepped back. "You killed them?" "No," she whispered. "We fed them." The ground split open beside us with a wet, tearing sound. Underneath the soil, something vast stirred. A lattice of roots, thick as arms, slick and pulsing. And at their ends, faces bloomed, half-formed, gasping for air. My grandmother reached out, her hand trembling. "It's hungry again, and it wants its bloodline," she pointed at me. Before I could move, the roots lashed upward, wrapping around her legs, dragging her down. She didn't scream, just looked at me one last time and smiled. "You'll take care of them now." Then she was gone, swallowed by the earth. The heartbeat slowed, the soil stilled, and in the silence that followed, a single apple dropped from the nearest branch, landing at my feet. It was pale, almost white, but when it split open, the seeds inside were teeth. I ran. I didn't stop until the orchard disappeared behind me. But that night, from miles away, I still heard it. The slow, steady pulse of the land. And when I woke the next morning, the soles of my feet were covered in dirt, as if I'd been walking barefoot through the orchard again. End of story. The Orchard House.